Welcome to the Fire Time Podcast, where it's never hot enough, slow is fast, and the way to win is to make it so stupidly easy to buy from you that there's no excuse not to. I'm your host, Tim Reed. And once again, I'm so excited to be here today. Welcome to the Fire Time Podcast. Well, hey, as we continue to move ahead with season 16 of the podcast, I just have been so excited to share this episode with you because it is part 2 of a conversation that we started much earlier this season with Dane Harman and Karen Harman-Smeltz. Now, full disclosure, I was actually hoping that we could release this episode the week after their original episode, a couple of months ago, but schedules are busy. I was traveling and they had things going on as well. And so we weren't able to get it out until now. But what I think is really cool is this, earlier this season at the HPB Expo, they recorded a fireside chat together where essentially Karen just asked Dane questions and he walked through the history of starting Harman Stoves. And that's an origin story that I think a lot of people in our industry just haven't heard before. What I wanted to do, though, was to have a follow-up conversation where we really kind of dove deep into, what is it that makes Dane and Karen tick? How do they approach innovation? How do they think about just leadership and their day-to-day lives? And to help with that, I wanted to invite my friend Peter Parsons to actually co-host this conversation. Now, Peter's been on the podcast a couple of times. He owns a business out of Corner Brook, Newfoundland. I mean, literally a quarter of the way across the globe from where I am. But he's also the world's biggest Dane Harman fan. And so today's episode's a long one. And basically, Peter takes the reins and I jump in from time to time, just trying to ask questions to understand how these two brilliant minds approach their work, approach just their lives and the purpose with which they try to serve the people around them. So there's a lot of really, really cool things in this conversation, but I'm going to step back out of the way for now so that you can hear it. Like I said, it's long and they go really deep. There's some things here that Dane and Karen say that I've not heard before, and it is really worth a listen. So as always, we'll circle back at the end and I'll share a few parting thoughts. But for now, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Joining me from Halifax, Pennsylvania, and Corner Brook, Newfoundland, I'm here today with Dane Harman, Karen Harman-Smeltz, and Peter Parsons. Guys, first off, I don't know if we have ever had 4 guests on the show via Zoom before, so this is a feat of technological amazement that we have literally spanned a quarter of the globe to put this together. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. We are spanning east, west, and north, aren't we?
Yeah. I'm going to tee it up this way, guys. Dane and Karen, you guys had an amazing conversation a number of weeks back at the HPB Expo where Karen, you interviewed Dane about just the origin story of Harman Stoves, which is a legendary company in this business. Now, today, what I'd like to do is have a follow-up to that conversation from a little bit different angle. And I'm going to let Peter take over in just a second. But I know that, Peter has been a huge champion of the products that you guys have worked on. He's literally built a market out from almost nothing in Newfoundland for pellet products because of the work that you guys have done. And we're going to shift and let him take over the show and just ask some questions about innovation, excellence, mindset, and we'll see where it goes. So with that, Peter, why don't you give us a little bit of a background into your experience with Harman, with Dane, and with Karen, and then let's let it rip.
So I actually met Dane in 2018. Actually, I was a fanboy, still a fanboy. So this is kind of a little bit kind of an odd thing. How kids meet their idol and stuff. So if I was a car nut and I got to meet Henry Ford, or if I was a computer nerd and I wanted and Steve Jobs was the person, well, Dane is the is the one for me. And I don't know if Dane, if you think of yourself that way, but like you're there. That name, Dane Harman, is up there with Steve Jobs and with Henry Ford and with all that stuff in our industry. So that's how I feel about it. And I know there's probably other people out there that feel the same way. So I'm extremely honored that I can sit down with you guys today and actually do this. So it's a pleasure. And I've been agonizing over this for weeks. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't qualify in the same circle as those guys, but thank you.
All right. So I know we heard the origin story. We knew about all that stuff from the last podcast and stuff. I'm curious about like the Pellet Pro system and stuff. And like back in like I think it's like 1991, you guys came out with that. Why does that design still work today? Like I explain it to customers all the time how it works, and I know how we sell it as dealers. But why does it work so well?
Well, the burn pot itself has its roots in anthracite coal, and anthracite coal has lots of ash, and to get it off the end of the burn pot, you have to push it. So that's where I had a pusher block that actually pushed this fuel up and out over the ledge, if you want to call it that. And anthracite burns best if you're feeding the coal up from the bottom and it's getting hotter and hotter as it rises, and you're adding air to it, and then it gets hotter and hotter until it comes out the top. It's really on fire, and that works for pellets as well. So that's how the first, instead of feeding it with a pusher block from the bottom, I fed it with an auger. And part of the reason for that is somewhere in there you have to have a brake, a fire brake, if you want to call it that. So we had an auger feeding in and pushing, because an auger can push as well, pushing the pellets up the hill, if you want to call it a hill.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay, now you have a need for some way to separate the hopper from the auger. So that time what I did is since I was using a pusher block in the coal stoves, I thought, well, I'll make a pusher block, push the pellets from the hopper across and down off of a ledge and then into the auger. So then I need a mechanism to do that. So that's when I come up with the pusher plate and the cam arm and so forth that makes the plate go back and forth. So that is part of the original Pellet Pro patent. So pellets drop in, pusher plate, in this case a pusher block backs up and pushes so many across and down. And they fall into the auger. Okay, so some years go by, and thinking about how can we improve that. The thing that I wanted to improve is the pusher block had to adjust the stroke, or adjust the stroke on how many pellets would actually fall in. And at that time, you asked a question, and this can get pretty long. So at that time, everything was adjusted with a threaded rod on the end of the pusher block, and it was returned with a spring instead of the cam returning it. It pushed it with a cam and returned it with a spring. So I just had an adjustment on the end, how far it could return, and that adjusted the stroke. So was also running everything with timers and temperature on when it would feed for how long. But we really wanted to get to where everything was run, the amount of feed was done by temperature. And so that's when switched over to a slide plate instead of the pusher block, which instead of pushing the pellets over the edge, it slides them to the one side, over and then basically pulls the rug out and under it and then slides it some more. So what that allowed me to do then was simplify. Instead of having this 1-inch thick by 4-inch wide block machined and everything else, now it's a laser cut part. And, it simplified and made it better. That's how we got to the Pellet Pro system.
It's just like, it's amazing too. Like everybody else, like the issue for us in Newfoundland. So like, if you guys haven't looked and seen where we're to, we're 90 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean. So
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
and pellet here is like, it was a dirty word, like pellet stoves. Like
Yes.
we started in 2001 as the Tin Man, and we started as a sheet metal and fabrication shop. And then, and it's unique to be able to watch like a flat piece of metal come into the shop and then go out as something else, right? So I really know, like really, your story really rings home with me a little bit when it comes to that stuff, because we're used to the same kind of thing. And like I got my roots in welding, so like I was a sheet metal worker and a welder and stuff too. So and like the idea of building stuff is phenomenal. Pellet Pro system, the ESP came at the same time. Did the ESP probe come in the same time as the Pellet Pro system started? Is this all in one go?
Yeah, the Pellet Pro 2 is where we started to have instead of a thermistor for the probe, it was a thermocouple, which can actually stand higher temperatures. As it turns out, we didn't need those high temperatures later on and went to a thermistor instead of a thermocouple. So the way this developed, everything was going fine. Let's do an insert. So now the question is, now wait, how am I going to adjust that feed adjuster if it's in the fireplace? So that's when we came up with what is basically the current knob board, as we say. And so it went by, to increase the temperature, you increase the time that the feed motor was turned on, basically. And but it didn't require you to get behind the stove. And that all started with the Invincible insert and the Invincible RS, because there was an Invincible T, which used the old system. So the Invincible RS used the new thermocouple, a new control that doesn't have any mechanical input. So that got us going on what really is the basis for what is still out there today in the P series.
So back when pellet stoves, like people would buy like pellet stoves from like our Canadian Tire here is like, I guess, your Tractor Supply in the US. So like England Stove Works have stoves and different things. These stoves that feed pellets from the top and drop them into a burn pot. Like, I mean, I know, and geeking out about stoves, like I know we have like the Harmans have a negative pressure firebox versus a positive pressure firebox that we have in the other brands, and like explaining that to customers, we don't get into that, like Tim says about with the bowling balls. Hey Tim, we don't feed too many bowling balls to customers, but it's kind of like we had such a fight in the beginning. It was neat to see because the fight was pellet stoves. No one wanted to hear about it. No one, and I said, well, we have Harman, and you start explaining about how Harman works and how it pushes the pellets up into the burn pot, how those kind of things make a difference. The fact that we can do temperature and not a feed rate, like when we set it to room temperature mode, that was a huge thing for customers.
Yeah.
Because as the day changed in like someone's home, when the sun came out and all of a sudden the place started to warm up, now all of a sudden the stove didn't need to be feeding. So for the person that had it on 4 pounds per hour on a different brand stove, now they're wasting pellets and stuff. And you could see a huge difference in consumption. So like we started getting those out there. And when they started to get out there, everything started changing. Like the whole dynamic, like people would kind of like be not for pellet stoves at all in the beginning. We went through a period of maybe 5 or 6 years and we changed the whole dynamic in our area, even on the island, because we were going all over the island to do them. But we changed the dynamic to the point where pellet stoves now became this good word, and everybody started coming looking for pellet stoves. And we're gone back kind of in the same boat again. Now people are going to like the Canadian Tires of the world going, well, I heard about those good pellet stoves that they've got and they sell. Oh, I'm going to get one of those too, but they're way cheaper here. And they started kind of doing that. So now we're gone like a different trend. So it's kind of interesting to see how the trend changed over the last little while. And like when I looked at some specs the other day, we've put over 300 stoves in the market since 2011. And I mean, that like it's for us, it was $1.5 million of revenue. Like it's crazy to think like how much, the stoves could do and what they do for customers because we're heating their homes with them. So it's amazing.
Yeah. So that whole system, really is at that time was on the edge of what's possible. And that's where we always tried to stay. And, we had some really smart people working for us. I won't name names because then I'll miss somebody, but, the same guy designing control boards and the control logic goes all the way back to the first ones. So he basically lived with pellet stoves in his basement, several, and they just he knew everything about them, and in addition to the ones that were being tested at the factory. So that's how the microprocessor thinks. And, when a new one comes out, okay, we can do this now because this new processor knows how to do this, and that one didn't know how to do it. And we need less memory or more memory or whatever. So uh, we've been very fortunate to have that technology always expanding and getting better.
Dane, let me ask this question. So you just said something really important about the people that you worked with being so smart. So like, you obviously had this amazing idea for this company, for this new way of thinking about stove design. So it starts with you, but you just said there's other people involved that can take it even further. How did you ride the line between being like the initial innovator but not the only innovator, and kind of sharing your ego with other people, like putting that aside so that their ideas could help push it further? How did you balance that?
Well, they're more important than I am. They're smarter than I am. And that's one of the keys is you hire people that are smarter than I am. So, or smarter than you are. So that way you don't need to wear out your own brain. But
Mhm.
anyway, I mean, the whole process really, uh, over the years ends up with, I draw a picture, on a sketch pad. And, I have stacks of books uh, with drawing sketches in them. I'm not doing anything. I might be doing a sketch. And then to say, well, I'm working on this. I need to have a gas stove or I need to have a brand X. So I do the concept. Okay. I'm working on this one. Here's the concept for this one. And then they would take that and run with it. And then I'm watching over it and so forth. And so that method allowed us to do like 2.5 new models a year. And after a while, it gets in the 40s of
Mhm.
how many stoves you're building and so forth. So,
So when that happens, so like how do patents affect your ideas? Like if you've got like an idea that's like that, do you have to go and research stuff first to make sure no one else has that? Like how does that all come about?
yeah, you do a patent search when you go for a patent and so forth. Or, like if you have if you have a doorknob or a door latch, that's a little tough. They're out there everywhere, so that you wouldn't need to bother with that. But, uh, like the the good ones were the Pellet Pro feeder and burn pot, that really amounted to something. I mean, I did a wood coal combination stove, and that had a patent with 52 claims on it, but we're not making it. So that, sometimes you can patent something that's not worth patenting, but
Mhm.
I'm getting in the weeds now with that. But
It's funny you say that, Dane, because I've had some patent conversations recently and just have learned a little bit more about that. And it is pretty crazy how it works. Like there are I mean, there's some people even in technology today at some of the biggest companies in the world that are not patenting their stuff because it takes so long. And by the time they go through the process, it's changed enough that they're moving on to the next thing. But when you have a patent, you get like a 20-year protection, don't you?
Typically 17, but things are moving around and changing, and then you can do improvements to it. And so they can last longer.
Okay. So your original patents, then they're still in place because of improvements that have been made?
Yes, I think, well, yes is the answer without going into detail.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's just a crazy process. I'm curious for you, Karen. So like we had you on the podcast a couple of years ago and we talked a little bit about your journey through this. So like, you know, you bring a lot of things to the table that are different than Dane. How did you complement him and work alongside together to leverage both of your strengths?
Yeah. So when I came in to the company working full time, I was taking over doing manuals and working with agencies and photo shoots and that kind of thing. So they were complementary roles because kind of taking everything from engineering and how do we push that out into, an actual product rollout. So that was just honestly a natural kind of gravitational pull for me. I can't say like there was one little aha moment in that. It just felt very natural. And I was given the ability to kind of grow at my own pace and take on more. I mean, as with family businesses, and Peter, you can attest to this too, with a family business, you just naturally see what needs done and you go do it. And so, before you know it, your hand is in pretty much every department of the company, which is awesome. Like nothing's cooler than being able to walk through your plant and hi Joe, hi Bob, and you know them, you know their kids, you know everyone. Yet it was a fairly large company, but you're that connected to your people because your hands are in all different parts of it. So, um, I think that that's a big part of it. I think that no one cares more than family, and that's a beautiful thing, especially from parents and kids, but also cousins and uncles and others that we had working in the plant back in the Harman days as well. And we feel that very strongly with DS now too. So like there's
Yeah.
definitely that feeling of nostalgia and love where we are today because it brings back a lot of those really great feelings and memories of where we can help this new company grow. So yeah, I've been loving it. I think that I'm trying to remember back to like the first product launch I was involved in. I think I might have been a sophomore in college. So it's been really great. Also moving along in product development, like being able to really take part in that. And we talk about pellet stoves and for example, the touch control, being able to really be integral in helping out with, okay, what does each icon look like? How is this going to work? How is this going to be coded? And I mean, it was really all hands on deck and that's super fun that we all get to be in part of that together and that everywhere that we sourced that was sourced from York, Pennsylvania, so based in Pennsylvania. We're also very proud for that, touch control. Everything it was our engineers. It was,
Wow.
a company locally that was creating all of that. We didn't have to go to a foreign country. We took a drive for about an hour and a half when we wanted to go see our circuit board company.
Wow.
What's it like though? Like when you have all these different things that are built into the stove, but you can't like no one's pulled the trigger on it. Like that is in like the industry needs it, they're asking for it, but now someone else is saying, "Hey, we're not doing this yet." Like, take us through that process.
Well, that's the difference between entrepreneurial business and a corporate business, just by nature. It's not just because of our industry, it's any industry it would happen in where, you think of the phases of a project and how can we make sure that this project, or product has life, into the next decade. So just like we talked about, Tim, with those patents, right? It's
Yeah.
like a patent, you might develop something now, but technology is moving so quickly right now. By the time you patent it, you're on to the next thing. That can be as far as stove technology as well. So yes, we did plan ahead with the touch control and Wi-Fi modules, and we're very confident in that at the time. And as time went on, that became not a priority. Larger companies have a lot of priorities, and it was not chosen. So for us, again, coming back to a more entrepreneurial business, it's super fun for us because now we don't have those constraints anymore, and we're excited to keep doing new fun things.
So does that mean you have to start like kind of over to like those patents and things like that, like the idea of the Harman stove, does that belong to HHT? Is that an HHT thing now? And like, any of those ideas that you have, all those books, Dane, like, is that something that we might ever see again in the future, or is
Well,
They
I'm still designing stoves, and I still know everything I know, so I can't help some of the stuff that ends up in the designs. I mean, surely something that I thought of 10 years ago is still available in my brain. And
Let me ask you a question, Dane. So like this amazing company, entrepreneurially, you sold it to a larger corporate company, worked for them for a while, and now you're back in the entrepreneurial world. So you've seen a lot of different ways of doing business. You've seen the rise of companies to huge, huge scale. Now, I just learned about this more recently, but throughout this whole thing, you've been like a power lifter to the point where, okay, Karen, you have to tell me, right? Did Dane have the world record for like men over 40 or 45 at like bench press or something like that?
Yeah, it was like a drug-free bodybuilding, bench pressing. Yes, that is true.
Dane, what was
That
the
is true.
weight that you had? Like, what's the max weight?
that record was 415 in competition.
Wow. And how old?
I did 400 at 40, and then we went into competition. So I think it probably might have been 41 or something like. I think so.
So I think like there's a correlation here. Like the discipline that it takes to be that excellent at something that has absolutely nothing to do with your day job, at least on the surface. What like how did your work in powerlifting and bodybuilding or whatever, how did that correlate to help fuel your innovative mind and your discipline in the company?
If you want to do something, you have to decide that you're going to do it. So once you decide, really decide, keyword decide, then a lot of stuff falls out of the way and you can go straight to that goal. Uh, just the simple thing that I was saying about, okay, I would show my guys, this is what I've decided that we want to make next. Okay, now the whole team falls together because he decided, if you know what I mean. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, is when you decide you're going to do something, other people want to help.
Yeah.
It's an unwritten law, but it's real.
Talk about that a little bit more. I think that that's really true as you say that. Like, what is it about like deciding on a direction that rallies people?
I mean, it's the same thing that took to put the man on the moon, and that is the will to do it. If you don't have the direction, and of course goes with that, the will to do it, it doesn't go as fast. In other words, you can get things done, but if you have respect for a leader that made a decision that we're going to do this and you believe them, it just goes better.
With that, though, becomes the responsibility of that leader. A lot of people can say, go do this, go do that, but it also becomes the responsibility of the leader to follow through, to care about the people that work for them, and to have that be really a transparent and open trust and bond, which I think he's always been really good at doing.
That's great. I mean, it reminds me, the book of Proverbs says, without vision, the people perish. And it's amazing that like in that scripture that it's actually like the people that are linked to the vision. It's not that without vision, you will wreck your life or not go anywhere. It's no, actually like the people you serve, they're going to perish if you as the leader don't have vision for what's going to happen. That's so good. In your career, so you come up through the Harman channel with Dane. When Harman sells to HHT, you have this long career at HHT. I mean, like over
17.
a decade, what, 15 years, 20 years?
17, yep.
17 years, yeah, a long time. And I want to ask you this. So like you're in the corporate world, you're a high-level executive with people underneath you. And I know that you have a huge servant's heart for your people. Can you talk a little bit just about how you approached leadership and and leading the people on your team, since we're talking about this idea of vision?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I felt a lot of things just came natural. I never tried to be something that I wasn't. So I hope that that always came through with those that I worked with. That nothing about any of us is special. We're all trying to help each other out. You never know what other people that work for you are going through. What chapter you came in on is one way to look at it. So I love people. So that helps. I get my energy from people. So I just kept doing that and didn't feel like I was, specifically following a certain mantra or a certain book. Or while I love self-help and I totally eat all of that kind of stuff up, I just tried to be like them. I don't like to seem like I'm above anyone. I don't like to tell someone to do work that I myself don't understand how to do. And some say that's a good idea, some say that's a bad idea. For me, I just like to know a little bit about what I'm asking somebody to do, or if I could at least do it for myself. Um, yeah, so that's in general how I believe in leading, and just being down to earth and seeing simple things that they need. And sometimes leaders fail to listen, and that happens a lot of time, especially in a fast-paced business. Everybody's running 100 miles an hour in 1,000 different directions, and that's when things get lost. That's when people get lost. That's when people get disconnected. That's when they don't feel valued.
In this industry in particular too, I found that for myself, I'm built to serve. So and it's serving the people that you're working with, it's serving the customers that are there. It's all those things and those pressures, and but you're, like you're fine with it. But like every decision that you make going forward is always about your work family as much as is your own family, and that's kind of the thing about your own business and stuff that I found. Like if I were selling this company tomorrow, how am I affecting the lives of the people working here? Are they still going to have a job? Are they still going to, do those things and all those pressures? And I'm sure you guys must have went through the same thing.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. And there's something special about those of us next of kin like yourself. So many dealers, even in the manufacturing world, right? That the parents started it, and now we've grown up in it. Now we're not little kids anymore. We're not 18-year-olds anymore, just dabbling in the business. We're grown up with our own families, and now we are also in this industry that's been habitually traditional in it's just a very traditional like business. And yet there's aspects that need to be updated and modernized. And I imagine for you and for a lot of dealers, it's hard to take over the business when the parents might still want some of their original ways in the business.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
one of the things that, I picked up on early on with HHT, and that when you're a, public company, the decision that I would make as a private company is different, but they're both right. In other words, if I'm a private company, the decision is right. And if you're a public company, their decision is opposite, but it's right for them. In other words, they're looking to keep the stock prices up. And so if we're making a model that's not really that profitable, or we're not selling that many, and we could make so many more of the high profit models, they'll stop making that one. But there's where I would say, well, no, wait, we are making money on it, and we do have dealers that want it. So we are going to keep making it. So there's the difference.
Even when like dealers then find these issues and come in, like what's that like for manufacturers? Like how do they take the feedback then coming into stuff like that, like when there are issues?
Well, then it goes right to R&D, and most of the time all the way to me, and we come up with a solution, and try and get it out to everybody.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a robust process from the time something comes in, gets channeled through, gets fixed, gets quality tested, then goes through the communication process and calling those that would be affected and making sure it gets out to every single dealer and if need be consumer. It's definitely a well documented process that goes through a lot of channels and a lot of people, and everybody's made very aware of it.
Well, so from a manufacturing perspective, I think about this like in my company. we have a software company. And so if there's a bug or an edge case where someone has an issue, the balancing act is always, okay, we need to make this right. Is it worth pulling more resources into this to fix it right now? Does it go in line of other things? And I'm sure it's similar as a manufacturer. How did you guys make the decision of, we really need to stop and address this now, versus it's kind of an edge case, maybe there's some user error involved? Like, how do you make the decisions of where to put resources?
If it's safety, it's immediate. In other words, you know, you go to the houses yourself, if it's safety.
It's also the frequency. So it's definitely severity versus frequency, right? Severity, boom, right off the bat, you're taking care of that immediately. Then it goes to frequency. And, is this an isolated problem? Is this an isolated problem only in high altitudes? Is this, this one dealer has all the problems, but no one else is reporting a single thing. Okay, well, maybe we need some training. And so it could be a whole pile of different reasons and ways to really evaluate where that service needs to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What I would do too, what I used to find, like, I would ask customers for their data. And like, it's weird because you'd call into tech support and tech support wouldn't ask for that or wouldn't do it. And I thought it was so strange because I remember having a call one time and I remember saying like, "Hey, can you send me your data?" And they said, "Well, how do you do that?" And, they put the USB stick in there and they'd send me an Excel spreadsheet basically. And I could go down through the sheet and I could see like minute by minute what was happening with the stove. And you could watch like on startup, you could see it in data that it was taking like 9, 10, 12 minutes for it to actually light up versus all these previous times that they did it. And it was like 4 minutes and the stove would light. And I'd say to him, like, "Do you guys change brands of pellets or anything like that?" "Oh, well, yeah, we did. We ran out of pellets and we went to the other store and stuff. And yeah, they had them outside." I said, "Maybe you should probably try a different brand and see if that works again." So it's kind of cool. Like they're so advanced that you can do that with them.
Yeah, dude. Whenever I talk to people about Harman Stoves now, I actually, ironically, like in my consulting work, I end up doing a lot of sales training on Harman products and other brands as well. But whenever I'm talking about Harman products, like there's so many things like that, like the touchscreen controls, the ease of use, self-diagnostic, whisper quiet mode. Like you go down the list, like these are things that are, now that you see them, are so obvious. Of course, this is how it needed to be, yet nobody else has done it. And I'd like to, I want to kind of get like behind the curtain a little bit. I want to ask each of you guys this, because I think that you both have brought so much innovation and excellence like into our industry in your own ways. And maybe we can start with you, Karen, like in the language of Stephen Covey, like how do you sharpen the saw to like to be in a position where you can bring excellence or innovation to something? Like, is it books? Is it podcasts? Is it like, how do you keep yourself sharp?
Well, that's kind of you to say. Yeah, it is books. It is. I love Dave Ramsey. Actually, I don't know if you know about the Entree Leadership and all of that. Great. I highly recommend everyone listen to him. And yeah, I'm a big self-help person, and I'll tell you one that is really great in business that I just heard the other day, and for some reason it really stuck with me. And it talks about talent and who you surround yourself with, and when you're hiring people within a company. And it says you don't judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree.
Mm.
Like, just an example of like, you hire someone to do a specific job, not everything, or like, I'm not built for that. I'm not built to develop pellet stove technology. I can help with the graphic side of all of that, but my dad, that's for him to do. That would be like me being a fish trying to climb a tree.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm built for. That's not where my specialty is. And so, that's just it really stuck with me and resonated with me as like, that's what we have to fill our teams with is make sure that everyone has their own special niche, and that, it's something very unique that you couldn't bring to the table yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dane, how about for you? Like, what do you do to stay sharp?
Well, it just always looking for what's next. What's the next edge that you can have? Just like castings, for instance. Everybody likes nice cast iron stove. Well, the process was, okay, first you make one out of wood. You make the part out of wood. And then you're going to use that to try to make a sand mold in the sand by hand. You're going to shrink 1% when you make a casting. So you're going to have to make this 2% bigger because you're going to do a wooden one. So that's one of the things like in cast iron. And of course, the computer software to actually help make those patterns. If you know computer programming and are familiar with computers, something new comes out, you know it. Okay, when you do everything I've done for so long and something new comes out, it stands right out. So, hey, there, I'll go with that. Let's try that. So I guess just being totally aware all the time and following what's happening and, who's making it, that's basically how I do it.
But speaking of technology like that too, like, have we reached the pinnacle though? Like where stoves are, where things like you look at, like you're talking about, like just the processes, the lasers, the different stuff, the castings. Like we got 3D printers now. People are printing 3D stuff like crazy. Like it's so, like the time is now when it comes to creating things. But has the efficiency or has the stoves come as far as they can come? What's the next thing for stoves having reached it?
Well, just easier operation, just communicating with your stove or, making sure that your temperature is what you want it to be. And you're thinking, yeah, well, you already have that. I asked for something new. Well, fire isn't new. And so we're just still trying to learn how to use that right. I don't have anything that's going to make fire obsolete. That's for sure. I mean, yeah, you have electric and so forth like that, but the problem with fire is it's fun, and you take that away. I mean, after everything that's going on, still I want to sit and watch a fire,
Yeah.
real fire, a bonfire or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're getting rid of that one. So
Saying that makes me think about everything that the hearth manufacturers that have been around since the 70s have been through. They've been through how many energy crises? Been through EPA regulation, over other regulation, gas regulation, just regulation everywhere, regulation changes everywhere. 2006, 2008, COVID. You think like this little thing called the internet is going to hurt. Like we're going to figure all of that out, right? Like right now, that feels like the stumbling block is like online versus not online, and that's like the real big hard part right now in the industry. But when you think about all the other hard stuff that has come across throughout the years that's been conquered, and fire and stoves is and will always be an essential primal need. And we're lucky that we're in the comfort business. And I guess it's like, how do we make the comfort business even more comfortable? And I think you're right, Dad. It comes down to just there's always an easier way. And when we talk about the iPhone, whoever said that we needed the iPhone? Someone invented it, and then we suddenly needed it. And even thinking about like industries, we're such a very traditional industry, and yes, new things are always going to come at us, and we shouldn't always feel like we have to reject that, because there's definitely ways that we can make that all work for us and increase our business.
Hey, this is Tim with the Fire Time Podcast, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. Well, hey, in our final episode of the season coming up, we are going to have a Q&A episode. And so as you've been listening or watching, if there's any questions that you have specifically about your business, what do I do in this situation? Or maybe me or a guest said something that you want clarification on, send those questions in and we'll do everything that we can to make sure that we get to it. You can go to itsfiretime.com/ask. Enter that question, and again, we'll try to answer it the best that we can. Hopefully, this Q&A episode is going to be something that really helps you out. Go to itsfiretime.com/ask to get your question in. Karen, I want to ask you something that is a little bit unrelated, but when you were on before, you made this comment. I've never forgotten it. I've referenced it in articles and podcasts since then. But
Boy.
you said basically the future me needs the today me to do this work right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love for you to elaborate on that a little bit. Just that concept of, hey, my future self needs my today self to do this.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it might go back to what my dad said about you just have to decide, right? So if you have a goal in mind, you can't afford to procrastinate. And I have to say, I am a recovering procrastinator. I am. And so I think even living by that mantra of like, I need to do this work today so that I can, get the reward and start building towards that reward and that goal, is something I just intrinsically had to always say to myself. And some of that too is I really like to be prepared. Probably one of my biggest fears is to not be prepared for something. And so that's another reason for that mantra of, you have to spend the day or, a couple hours at night or whatever it is, preparing for what's happening the next day. Because if not, you're going to fall flat or you're not going to be prepared. So I don't ever want to have regrets. I want to be able to lay my head on the pillow at night and say, hey, I gave it my all today. And so if I fell short, that's okay because I did the best that I could with the time that I had of that day.
That's great. That's great.
I want to get political for a second. So, like 2014, a P43, we sold it here in Canada for $3,617. In 2026, it's $48.99 plus a $700 tariff onto the stove. So installations went from $5,000 on that to somewhere around like $8,000 installations, right? I looked at the numbers, like our 2025, 2026 season so far, we paid $16,000 in tariffs just to be able to sell Harman brand stoves. So, and that's a Canadian dealer. So I just like tariffs have affected us and the way that we do business. So like when you hear that, like what do you guys think when you hear stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's what we can't control. We can't control is the tariffs,
Yeah.
and certainly that's everybody is super frustrated about that, and we can't wait till that gets reined in, and just think that that has to happen.
Is there a problem in the hearth industry that keeps you guys up at night? Like something that you feel generally hasn't been solved yet?
The big elephant in the room for all of us is how do we handle the future of selling stoves online, making dealers whole at the same time? Knowing that it's happening whether we want to or not, again, through big box. I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but I know a lot in the States where someone will go buy a stove at a big box store and then they'll call a dealer and expect that local dealer to do the install. And, that's not usually met with open arms by the dealers. And so, that's something that I think it's everyone's pain point. Everyone, including manufacturers, are afraid of it because we care about our dealers and our dealers are how we grew. Yet this thing called the internet is out there and it's not going away. So I don't know that anyone's mastered how to figure that out yet in a way that is best for the dealer and the customer and the manufacturer.
Yeah. Peter, to your point, I think about this a lot. Like, there's a really good book that I read a few years ago about like growing a company. And basically the idea is more versus enough. And every
Mm.
company has to make that decision of how much is enough and when do I need more. And there's a time and place for both of those. But in to use the language of Jim Collins, like one of the reasons that many companies fall is what he calls the undisciplined pursuit of more. It's a guaranteed way for your company to start to crumble. And I think that with like that example of like, hey, we use specialty dealers to grow it, but then we open it up to big box. From my perspective, it's like, well, let's think about why we would do that. Like if we have a strategy that says, hey, this market is underserved, our dealers they can't take care of everybody. We're doing lead generation, we're driving business in. It's just simply more than we can keep up. We can talk to our dealers and say, hey, we're going to open up this other channel, but we are going to make sure you keep growing too. And as you go down that path, if you're not growing, we're going to reevaluate our decision to open up another channel. I think that stuff can happen in relationship and conversation. I think the biggest problem is oftentimes manufacturers make that decision without any discussion with their dealer. They don't reevaluate a year later, 2 years later. Has this helped them grow? Are we being faithful to the original commitment that we made? I think that all that stuff can work itself out, but it takes hard and slow work of doing it together and asking, like, being transparent with what is our end goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that concept in general is really cool. And honestly, it resonates to DS where we are working right now. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're not trying to be it for everybody. Um, we're just enjoying making new products, selling it to the dealers that we have. Yes, growing in some dealerships, but we can't get too big too quickly. And so that really resonates with me. I'm going to share it with the team. I like that.
That's great. Okay, well, I know we've kept you guys for a while, so we'll start to wrap this up. So last year, I came out to DS Stoves for your guys' annual conference, and it was really formative for me. Well, first off, just the background of DS Stoves having Amish roots to it is so different than, any other major manufacturer that I know of. And there's an intrinsic set of values that come with that, of honesty, of a commitment to do what's best for your neighbor, of hard work. And it wasn't that this was like preached, like, hey, these are our values. It was just the air you breathe when you're in that environment. And so for me, it was really special coming in and seeing that. And you guys have both talked about how coming back to a small company after an experience with a big one, not that a big one's bad, but coming back to a small company that values these things, like, what has that done to breathe life into both of you? And why should local retailers and other manufacturers, why should they think about adopting principles like this to breathe life into their people?
Wow. Yeah, that's so good and so true. It is a feel good, positive atmosphere. There, the mantra for absolutely everyone is how can I help? We get things done. Nothing goes backwards. Everything always goes forward. And that is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing to be part of. You know that your effort going in every day is going towards a goal. Nothing's going to be taken away, reduced, canceled, whatever. You're always going in a forward motion. And also the ability to take risks and say, yep, this is what we decided. We're going for it. Let's go. And we do, and we go, and it happens, and it's awesome. So I've really been enjoying that. I've been enjoying that we've been able to bring so many products to market so quickly, and that it's just incredible to see what they can get done because of perseverance as well and dedication to each other. But you're never going to walk through our plant where everyone's not happy talking to you, asking me how your weekend was. Like, it is a culture. You can't fake it. You
No.
can't make it. It just is or isn't. And it's awesome to be able to come into something that I didn't know that could still exist
Hmm.
either. And, our vision is to enhance lives. And that's the people who work for us. It is the people who own our product. It is our suppliers and vendors. And I think that we adhere to that. And that's, again, as a vision, it's something we'll continue to work on and something we continue to go back to and say, okay, we're about to make this big decision. How will this enhance the lives? How will this affect everyone around us? And if it's a negative thing, we don't do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Dane, how about for you?
Yeah, well, the nice thing is we decide on what we're going to do. When I started working for him, we talked about building a wood stove, and I told him how many years it will probably take and how much it will probably cost. In that meeting, we decided to build one. That was, we're
You
not
didn't have to
talking
have a
about,
meeting to have the meeting to have the meeting.
yeah, we're not talking about that anymore. What else? What's next? What else are we going to do? And, it really comes down to we are the sum total of our decisions or our choices or whatever. And so that's different than in the corporate world. You have to have meetings and you have to discuss it. And then it gets maybe lost a little bit. And then, comes back and you may have the same meetings and nobody's doing things wrong. It just, the corporate way compared to being able to run with it. So that's the fun part.
That makes a ton of sense. And okay, so I have one more question, then Peter, you can take us out. You guys have, again, you've seen the rise of the company that you built growing and growing and growing, and then you sell it, and then you see what it can be at scale, with real corporate dollars behind it. And now you've transitioned out, and you're back to a smaller entrepreneurial business, putting everything you have into it. What have you learned about business? Like, what's your biggest takeaway from that ride?
Well, I have appreciation for both. I have to say, my biggest thing that I learned, I mean, in the corporate atmosphere, I would not know, I would not have probably half of the experiences and knowledge without having had the corporate experience. I learned a lot. I was trained in a lot. I've learned through bad experiences. I've learned through good experiences. Also, then through time, realized this isn't me. This isn't what I want. There was nothing bad that happened. There was no bad reason that I left HHT. I just had an all-knowing moment come over me that it was time for me to move on. And they know that, and love when I get to see my HHT friends for sure. But, I just needed to start something new, and I needed to be an entrepreneurial business. I knew that that fit me for my personal desires and goals. Um, and for the closeness and how I like to be with people, it fits better for me. So that's the main thing. And like you said, Dad, it's decisions. It's being able to know that you're constantly propelling in a forward motion and that your day-to-day efforts are going towards a goal that you can see, versus one that moves.
Yeah, that's great. How about you, Dane?
Well, I think one thing that stands out is I can't think of any company that got better after they were purchased by a bigger company. It's a balance, okay? If you have a company and you want to sell it or you're thinking about selling it, they better give you enough money to make it worth it all because it won't be the same.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And that is, man, both those answers are really good. Okay, Peter, I'll let you take us home.
This has been awesome. I just a couple things I've got. Like, what role does wooden pellet heat play in a world that's increasingly focused on energy efficiency and getting off fossil fuels? Like, what do you guys think this is going to look like?
Wow. Well, that's a big question, especially with everything we're dealing with on the wood stove side, and as those decisions happen with the new methods that are coming down the pike, at least here in the United States. Um, I think wood stoves are never wood and pellet. I think energy options are never going to go away. I think that every homeowner should at least have two different types of energy in their home because of fluctuations. Obviously, we've seen a huge increase in gas stove and gas product prices, over the last, well, really, honestly, since Trump took office, as gas prices go down. So we know that thing, right? So you're always going to need your pellet and wood to balance out um, your gas and electric. I don't see
Yeah.
anything going away.
Yeah, I don't think that it's going back to fire. I think we're going to keep fire. So yeah, you'll have electric and so forth, but we're still going to be heating with a flame.
I think our challenge, Peter, is always going to be in what regulations happen in government affairs and making sure that we are just always linked in with, HPBA, HPBAC, government affairs, and really doing our best to get to the Hill and to make all of those contacts, which they're doing a really, really great job right now, really working with EPA and everything with the new methods. So
I'm surprised that we haven't seen some different stuff yet in the industry, and maybe that's where going back to your roots, like you're doing with DS, makes a difference. Like, we haven't seen really like a hybrid stove or something that's really different that combines two different kinds of fuels and stuff. Like
The
we have
pellet
wood
stove
with fire.
/ air conditioner.
Yes,
I
yes,
know.
there you go.
Well, I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but it'd be nice if they didn't go quite so far with the regulations. Uh, in other words, when the grams were four grams an hour, you didn't see smoke coming out the chimney, and maybe there was or whatever. Think about this. Okay, there's an ambient particulate matter. You burn the stove that burns at 1 gram an hour. it's going to come out cleaner than it was in the room. Everybody spent so much money trying to get down to those low numbers and have done it, but it's hard to do, I guess, is what
Yeah.
it comes down to, or else everybody would do it.
100%. I mean, I might get in trouble for saying this, but every time I teach about wood stoves, I always try to talk to people about, like, with current technology, if you're selling a hybrid stove, it's not like a hybrid car where you get, like, the best of electric and the best of gas. It doesn't work that way. A hybrid stove, it's not that it's a bad, evil thing, but the hybrid stove was not created to solve a customer's problem. It was created to pass an EPA test. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it was not created to solve a customer's problem. And there's complexity when you shove a cat up into a, baffle system that already is totally airtight. And so I think that when innovation can make things better environmentally and solve a customer's problem, that's the sweet spot. And unfortunately, as regulations get tighter and tighter and tighter, it becomes harder to satisfy both of those at the same time. And now this is my perspective, and I don't think I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth.
You're good.
I think that if we had never had the EPA come in, I think our stoves would be way worse than they are today. There is no possible way that we would have been able to go from 60 to 80 grams an hour down to 1. There's no way. It never would have happened. And so I think that there's this balancing act where it's like, I'm not defending the EPA. I'm not saying everything that they do is great or right or efficient. No way. But what I will say is that pressure forces innovation. And whether it's competition, again, let's go back to the small local dealer, but big box gets set up. That's pressure. That will lead to innovation. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it will lead to innovation. It has to. And I found the same thing in my company, that without pressure, I get complacent. It just happens. So I would say, my view, there is no possible way that our products would be as good as they are if regulation had not applied pressure. I'm not saying that pressure is pleasant. I'm not saying that every regulation is even right. And I'm not saying the ends justify the means of like, oh, just regulate it down, because that can destroy an industry. But I think that innovation doesn't happen without pressure.
Yeah. And innovation is great, but it can take the fun out of it. And you're seeing that Peter, just, what you were talking about is like, oh, it doesn't seem like everyone's innovating as much. Or yeah, there used to be, everyone had a concept car, at HPBA, you go back maybe 10 years and it felt like maybe it wasn't something that they were going to sell 1 million of, but at least they were thinking. Their R&D department was really going after something new and exciting to show at the show and prove what their boundaries really are. And now with all the regulation, it does. I think I'm somewhere in the middle on that, where regulation may have helped us, but there's no need to continue to make it go down lower.
Yeah,
it just makes them more expensive. It hinders the time that it takes to actually make the product. It costs a fortune to make the product, which then makes it cost more to all the consumers. And over-regulation, we got to watch that.
Yeah, and so I love that, Karen. There is diminishing returns, no question. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. And I always talk now about, like, man, the difference between a stove at 2.5 and 1.0. I mean, honestly, that's like saying, well, hey, this car gets 65 miles to the gallon. It's not good enough. It needs to get 75. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like, we have come so far in this. It is it really does become diminishing returns. So that's really good. Hey, this conversation has been amazing, and I'm thankful to all of you for being on it. I'm gonna end with this, because literally this was texted to me earlier today by an unnamed sales rep. He knew I'd be talking to you guys, and he texted me and he said, "Hey, I'm not joking. I was in a dealership earlier today. We were talking about pellet stoves, and this guy mentioned some difficulties he was having with one brand and getting technical support. And the sales rep, who does not sell Harman, said, have you thought about picking up Harman? And this is what the dealer said back to him. And I quote, I can't sell Harman because there's a dealer too close to me, but I'd donate a kidney and my firstborn to get it. End quote. So here's where we're going to end, guys. You both have built something so special through the Harman brand, and you're doing the same thing again through DS Stoves. And that is really cool to see that, like, this is the effort that you guys put into it. This is what you get, is people who are loyal, people who care. And apparently I feel bad for this poor man's family, right? That he donate a kidney and sell off his firstborn to take it on. But just know that that's what you guys have built. And it's really, really special. And it's cool to know that the journey's not over, that you're continuing to do that with DS Stoves.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been an honor to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Nice talking to you, Peter.
It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. I'll never forget this story because I'm standing there. Derek Harvey, it's the first time I met Derek. Derek was a sales rep, and a shadow kind of comes over my shoulder, and I look over and it's you. And it's like, and you've got like a safari kind of style shirt on with the pockets in it. You got pencils in the pocket and the whole 9 yards. And like, you start, and I'm looking at it going, and oh my God, it's Dane Harman. And I started talking about the stove, and I started talking about the touchscreen and the ash pan is big and the 92 pounds of pellets and all that stuff. And then you pull out your phone, and I went, man, this guy, how rude is that, taking out his phone when I'm in the middle of talking to him, eh? And it's like, you lean over and you go like, have a look at this, son. And like, you showed me a prototype of a stove that you were talking about at the time. And I'm like, my mind was just so blown with the experience of meeting you there then. And the next day, we won the Harman Dealer of the Year award. It was our first time ever winning it, and you presented it, and you got up there on stage and you said, "Oh, this guy," and he said, "He tried to sell me on one of my own stoves." And it was such a great experience. And like little things like Karen, like you sent me a letter one time, and it was a thank you letter from you guys, and it meant the world. And it as a dealer, like we'd never go away from that, like that brand. You guys have moved on to DS, and as a dealer, I'm ready to move with you. Like that's how we feel about it. Like it's about knowing like those kind of things, those small little gestures that make such a big difference and an impact in our lives and stuff. And it means the world. It does. It means the world to me. And I thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, look at you though, Peter. I mean, you made a whole entire Facebook page for that only benefits the Harman brand. So you took that initiative. You did amazing things. You're posting amazing videos, and I mean, we can't thank you enough. You don't understand what big part of the puzzle you are. So thank you.
Yeah.
Guys, well, this has been so good. I just really appreciate all of your time. It's been incredible. And yeah, hopefully we can do this in person sometime. Maybe, Peter, we can get you to Nashville next year.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds good. We'll work on it.
Cool.
Let's
All
do
right.
it.
See you guys.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Peter Parsons, Dane Harman, and Karen Harman-Smeltz. It was really cool to be a part of. And, it was a long one because there was just a lot of different directions that we went. And I thought it was really cool having Peter alongside to host it, just because he has been such an admirer of Dane's work over time. And he's done all kinds of work with Karen as well. In thinking about just like everything that was talked about, I feel like we have to start here. When Dane talked about like the secret to his success was hiring people smarter than him. There's so much to that. And I think that like, it's just amazing that someone who has made some of the most innovative and brilliant products our industry has ever seen, who has figured out ways to do things that are like beyond anybody else. He just goes, oh yeah, like I hired people that were smarter than me. And that's not to discount his intelligence. If you have spent any time around Dane, you know that he's absolutely brilliant, but his ego is in a position where he doesn't have to be the smart guy all the time, right? He's able to humble himself and hire people that can take things bigger and further than he could. And I think that this is something that is easy to say. It's really hard to do. But man, if we want our companies to thrive, we come to a crossroads at some point where we have to decide, is it more important that I'm the smart one and I get the credit for all the work, or do I want the company to grow where it needs to go? And if the answer is the second one, well, you got to hire people smarter than you and empower them to utilize their brilliance to succeed. A lot of the time we think we want that, but as people around us start innovating and coming up with incredible ideas and things that, we hadn't thought of ourselves, there is a tendency to try to pull back the reins and to try to hold back because we want the credit. And I think that what Dane said is just amazing as a starting point, because this guy is clearly brilliant. And his first thing is to say, yeah, hire people smarter than me. And I think that also, like, as he shifted into talking about the will of a leader, I think that this is very true as well, that when a leader makes a decision and sticks to it, it becomes easy to rally around. When a leader can't come up with what needs to be done, or, he or her is always changing their mind. Okay, we're going to do this. Well, now we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. It doesn't create an environment where people have any like firm ground to stand on, and this kills innovation and quality. But similar to when Dane talked about the idea of like, we're going to put a man on the moon. Well, once that decision has been made, now we can go about the work of getting it done. And we don't have to worry about, is this going to change tomorrow? Is this going to change the next day? It's like the decision's made, people rally, and we start to go to work. And I think that he's really correct in, with his companies, when that decision is made, hey, this is what we're going to do, right? This is the leader's will. It's going to happen. Now it's amazing how momentum starts to build. People rally to the cause, and debris and attrition kind of starts to go to the wayside. It's not a guarantee that if you make a decision, every single one is going to be right. And it's not saying that you should never change your mind, but it is saying that making decisions with purpose has a way of galvanizing people together and rallying them to the cause to accomplish the work. And I think that many people are so afraid of making a mistake that they can't actually make decisions of consequence. And I think that is something really insightful from everything that he talked about. Thinking about Karen as well. I mean, Karen has been on this podcast before, and I love that we went back and referenced what she said about how the future me needs the current me to do the work so that future can happen. I mean, I've never forgotten that. And it's clear that like that's how she has lived her life. But one of the things I thought was really insightful that she brought to the table is like this idea of how quick we are to judge people without actually asking, have we set them up for success? And have we put them in the right seat for that success? It's easy to complain about people in a company and say, oh, this salesperson's terrible, or this installer's bad, or this, CSR, I wish they could do the work better. But to her point, it's like, well, are you asking a fish to ride a bicycle? Because if you're doing that, of course they're not going to succeed. And maybe the problem isn't them. Like maybe they need to be, put in like the water versus, above ground and with a tool that has no relevance for their how they are made. I think that there really is something to this. And it's not that there's ever performance problems where, we need to address those or even like fire people or let them go if they're not performing their duties. But it is to say that before we take any action like that, it is absolutely critical that we ask the question first, like of, myself as a leader, have I put them in a position to succeed? Are they a fish and I'm asking them to ride a bike? Because if that's what I'm doing, like it's not the fish's fault that the fish can't ride the bike. It's my fault for being foolish enough to think that this is even possible. And so I've found this a lot, that when performance issues come up, a lot of the time it is the leader trying to force people into a box that like maybe they're not meant to be in. And by asking, okay, how is this person wired? What are they good at? Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? Let's try to either find a role for them or mold their role so that we can maximize the former and minimize the latter. And again, it's not a guarantee that every person will work out, but there's a much better chance of it. And I've found in multiple situations that aligning a role to someone's strengths versus like making a quick decision to move on is really, really powerful. You know, an example of this, years ago, I had a guy working for us in our company. His name is Pat Budson. We had a tribute episode to him a little while ago on the podcast. And Pat was not the best when it came to technology. He was in his mid 70s when he worked for me, and he was an incredible salesperson. But our computer system at the time was like pretty cumbersome. It wasn't user friendly. And as he was like training on it, it just became clear, I mean, this is not going to be a good fit. You know, we're going to be banging our heads against this wall all day long. And so instead, what we did for Pat is we got like old school carbon copy handwritten invoices. And essentially we just said, hey, like anything you sell, write it up on this invoice, leave it on my desk. I'll take care of all the paperwork. And this set him free to start selling like crazy. And you know, Pat worked a day and a half a week. He was semi-retired when he came to work for us. But in a day and a half a week, like there were months where he would be selling the same or better than people who were working full time because he was such a brilliant sales mind. So the whole thing is like, well, okay, we can fight against the computer system. We can complain about it all we want. And like, it's probably not going to work out if we make that the deal breaker. But instead, by saying, okay, this person is clearly brilliant. They understand our industry. They understand sales. Let's find a way for them to work within the system that benefits their strengths and leverages that. And I think that that's exactly what Karen was talking about. Again, it's not a guarantee that it's always going to work out, but it is to say that wherever possible, I think one of the major roles of a leader is to know your flock, know the people that are working within your organization and set them up for success. There will be some situations where, hey, it's the wrong fit and like no matter what happens, they're not going to have success. Okay, that's fine. Like you can cut ties if you need to at that point. But I would say for a lot of people, by shifting their role or the things around them, you might find that you get way more out of it than you first imagined. At least that has been my experience. So I thought that was really, really cool that Karen talked about that. You know, man, I mean, there was so much in here also. Like, I want to go to what Dane said in thinking about what he's learned over like this entire journey of business that he's been on. This idea of when a company sells to someone bigger, they often don't become any better. And I think those words, man, they're worth thinking about. In our industry, there is like this push for scale and for growth. And I am for growth in general. You know, I want to be faithful with what I've been given. I think every company should be faithful with what they've been given, and that they should grow in a way that is appropriate for their company as they continue to serve more customers. It makes sense that like naturally there's going to be growth to that. But you know, growth for the sake of growth and scale for the sake of scale is cancer. It really is. And I think that Dane's point is very wise. Like, just because a company gets bought by somebody bigger does not mean that it is going to get better. And I would say that for any of you who are on like the business ownership journey and you're thinking about like, okay, well, if I just had more scale, if I could just sell out to these people, or, you know, if I could just get someone to buy me, then it will be better. I would just caution that might not be the case. I'm not against selling a business. You know, I'm not against growing and having more scale if it makes sense. But there is something really special about running a scrappy company. There's something really special about that. I know people that have sold their companies to large organizations and made a lot of money from it. And what I continue to hear in these conversations is that you will never have more fun than you're having right now as a scrappy business. It will never be more fun. Yeah, you might be able to make more money someday. Things might be bigger, but it's not going to be more fun. And that's one of the things that I think is really important in the journey of business, is making sure that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and that we try and have some fun along the way. Life's not a zero-sum game, and the quality of our lives is absolutely not defined by the number of zeros in our bank account. And I think what Dane said is something that we should all think about. And it reminded me, honestly, I referenced the book title in the interview, and I botched it. I said it was More versus Enough, but it's not. The book title is called Big Enough, and it's linked in the show notes. It's written by Lee Lefevre. And basically, it's the story of how he had a groundbreaking idea that turned into a company, and there's all this demand for it. And he faced a lot of questions in his journey about taking money and scale and growth, or of staying small and creating the life that was right for him and his family. And it's a really, really good book that I think all of us should think about, because again, life is not made up of the sum of one's possessions. It is much more than that. And it's a question that everybody needs to answer, is like, how much is enough? When does a company get big enough to where we can say, yeah, that's how big it is, because that is what's right for our customers, for the people that work here. And I think that Dane, answering that question very honestly is something that we should all be thinking about too. So, man, there was so much here from top to bottom, and my hope is that you listen to this again. And I think what's so cool is, again, Dane has lived this journey. He has innovated beyond almost anybody else, in just incredible ways. He has seen growth like a rocket ship. He sold his company to a much larger business, worked in that for a while, and now he's back to working within a small entrepreneurial organization at DS Stoves. That is a journey that is worth listening to, man. That is worth listening to. And for Karen, she experienced that growth as well at Harman. She had a really successful career as a corporate executive, continuing her father's legacy. And now she's also back with an entrepreneurial company. And so these are two people that vastly different, you can just tell, in how they approach life, but so wise. And, if we want to build organizations that serve us and the people around us and the people that work, within the organization, man, Karen and Dane are two pretty tough people to beat, because I think that they've lived it and they continue to live it day in and day out. So it was really, really awesome getting to speak with them. And again, having Peter Parsons do this was amazing. Peter coming in as someone who has been such an admirer of Dane over the years, I just felt like he brought an insight to this conversation that not many people have. So super, super thankful to him for being a part of it as well. Well, hey, if this episode today has been a blessing for you and you want to support this show financially, you can do that by going to the website itsfiretime.com/join. That's itsfiretime.com/join. And, we are incredibly thankful to all of you who do support this podcast month in and month out. It truly means the world, and it's the reason that we can continue to produce episodes and content, and it's the reason that we've been able to make the upgrade to go to video this season. So thank you to all of you who do support this. If you choose to support it, we have some awesome rewards. Again, itsfiretime.com/join lays it all out, but we just have some rewards that, we want to send out as a way to say thank you. We see you and we appreciate you so much. And, if you can't support this podcast, that is absolutely okay. We want it to be a free resource to help you bless the people around you, and we hope it does that. So as we close out today. My hope is that you can think about what Karen and Dane talked about and put it into practice. Maybe it's just that idea of like, have you been expecting a fish to ride a bicycle? And you need to think a little bit more about the seat that you've put that person in within your company, or the tools that you've given them. And maybe by rethinking that, you can actually grow their ability to help themselves and help your company as well. Maybe it's what Dane talked about. It's about the decisiveness of a leader, being not afraid to make a decision of consequence so that people can rally around it and go accomplish the mission. My hope is that you can be thinking about those things this week and putting it into practice. Well, hey, that is all we have for today's episode. Like I said, I hope it gave you value. As always, we will talk again very soon. Thank you for listening to the Fire Time Podcast. To learn more, visit the website itsfiretime.com. Music from this episode was written and recorded by In Bloom out of Portland, Oregon. We thank you for listening to the Fire Time Podcast, where it's never hot enough, slow is fast, and the way to win is to make it so stupidly easy to buy from you that there's no excuse not to. We'll see you next time.